Back of caps, simple. If you have the option of sewing something in a cylinder round frame or sewing it flat, which would you choose? Flat, okay? And what I did for decades is the 12-centimeter hoop that comes with your machines. It's great for the sleeves of shirts, but it's also great for the back of hats. You can come up with your own jigs or hooping devices. I use the corner of a table forever. I'll tell customers you only got to hoop one correctly. Once you get the one hoop correctly and straight, then take a Sharpie and mark where the edges are on the bottom of the hoop. Now as you hoop, line up on the Sharpie line so you can get every one in the exact same spot. If later you don't want your Sharpie mark on there, it's called goof off or rubbing alcohol. It will come off, even though say it's permanent ink, but on plastic it will, right? So, and it'll sew perfectly flat. You don't have to hoop the entire backing. Most hat backs are pretty stable. Now, who embroiders mesh right now? Trucker caps, back of mesh, front of mesh, all of that. It embroiders fine. There's no issue with that at all. You want to use the cap backing. What I recommend is this though. If the mesh is white, use your regular cap backing, okay? White or the light gray. But if it's any other color, what do you want to use? Black. Some places don't sell cap backing in black. It's pretty, you can get it some places, but it's rare. All you got to do is order the 8x8 sheets of the crisp tearaway that anybody sells, anybody, Madeira, Ganold, embsupplies.com, bless you, okay? And then fold it in half. It gives you the 2 layers. You got 4x8, which is standard cap backing, but use black. It's less noticeable and you don't need to pick out all the pieces like you always do, okay? Now, this is a question I've had in class before. And last year I was just telling people, I was like, trying to explain it to them, but I put a picture of it in here. So a lot of times, like these Barrett hats I got up here, we got a logo on the front, we got a logo on the right side, we got a logo on the left side, right? This is one logo, hooped one time. That's why the frames are 270 degrees, can sew all the way around on the hat. But most of the time, if your customer wants a logo on the side, do they usually want 2 sides? No, they usually want one side. A little flag, right? A little chevron, phone number, something like that on there. So what I tell people to do is most of my customers, if you got a 48-piece order, what they wind up doing is sewing 96 hats. Why? They sew the front of all of them, and then they rehoop them, position for that side logo, and then what? Go back and sew the side of every single one of them. You don't have to do that. Your frames are designed to sew it as one piece, whether there's a logo on one side or the other. Now, what I don't advise you do is go into your settings in your software, whether you're doing Pulse, Wacom, CompuCon, Sierra software, PE Design. I don't recommend you go into your defaults and turn off your auto centering features, because that'll get you in trouble, is what it'll wind up doing. I mean, I've had people do that, forget, go to sew a shirt, didn't trace, bam, hit a hoop because the logo wasn't in the center anymore. So what I tell people to do, you normally have about 12.5 inches of sewing field, 1/2 inch for the safety margin. If you only need to do one spot, you use what's called a ghost stitch. So in this logo, for example, I would sew bandits, and this is in puff. Center out, come over, sew the logo, and then when that logo is done sewing, so this would be one color, then it sews white, red, blue, white. So that's 5 colors. And then over here is my ghost stitch. That is my 6th color in the logo. And what that is just 2 to 3 penetration points on the screen, right? So upside down, I want the flag on the left side of my hat. So on the screen, it has to be on the right side. Center bottom with my logo. I'm over to 6.25 inches. I create my ghost stitch at that triangulation at where? 6.25 inches, which gives me a grand total of 12.5. Now the design is 100% centered. I do it on the seam, I do my trace feature, and I let it sew. On the 6th color, some machines will not see those 2 penetration points. So it would move to that position, but then immediately go back to the center and the first color of the logo. Snap on the next hat, sew the next one. Some machines may want to try to sew that. No big deal. Just take the thread out of the needle. If you don't want it to even penetrate, take the needle out of the needle holder. Just make sure you tighten the screw back up, because if not, the whole thing's going to fall apart with the vibration of the machine. Because normally, even here, you know that inching stitch, how a machine starts? The sensors are deactivated during that. Because that inching stitch is what gives the top thread time to connect with the bobbin and then take off. And when it takes off is when the sensors become activated. So it won't even stop and tell you you have a thread break. Y'all have seen that already. How many of you sew something, it does a trim, it goes to sew a dot on an eye like Bill, right? But it didn't connect, it didn't sew, it stopped sewing, you went to start the next logo, too late, you looked at it and you're like, oh crap. So how do you fix it? Needle and thread. You literally sit there and use needle and thread to go back and put a little dot above the eye and you fix it. Does that make sense? And this is something you can play with. Same scenario, if you're having your designs digitized for a hat and you have that grab bag from Otto or just sample hats from them, right? I tell people, spend $100. Order 2 or 3 different styles at 80 cents, $1 a hat. Keep them underneath your machine. Why? That's how you sew your samples when you get your new logos in to show a customer. I really don't care what color it is, right? Do it in their colors, but do it on a similar style hat at least. Show them a true-to-life representation of what they're paying for. But the most important reason you have those is, it's birthdays are coming up. It's Christmas, it's holidays. You got all kinds of stuff to sew for gifts. One. But number 2 is that customer that never orders hats from you. Every time you run his production now, just reach under there and grab a hat, embroider it for him, and throw it in the order for free. No charge whatsoever. I promise you, if you do that 5 times, 2 of those people will now start ordering hats from you. All right? And what'd that hat cost you? $1? It's good marketing, isn't it? All right? Easy Frames also works for the back of caps and the sides of caps. This is stick and stitch, okay? Been around forever, of course. Fast Frames, Easy Frames is just a better mousetrap. It's anodized aluminum instead of steel, so it doesn't bounce. You can walk away from the machine. It holds weight. People sew boots with these things. So stick and stitch, okay? So a lot of people will do that. If you're doing multiples of hats like this on the back, when you pull it off because it's a tearaway, what happens is it only tears away where it embroidered like the little number. We call it patching. So what you do is you have these little squares pre-cut. So you take the little square, you stick it under and you stick it back on. That reapplies it. Stick it on, stitch the next one. Do the same thing. Down at the bottom of that frame, do you a little mark on each side with the Sharpie. Now you know where to slide the next one on and just hit the start button. No tracing. You're in production. Keep going, keep going, keep going. If you get to a point after it's sewed 5, 6 hats, and then the main piece of that sticky backing is not sticky anymore, unscrew the fluted knob, pull it off over near the trash can, take your KK spray adhesive, hit it again, you got brand new sticky backing for another 4 or 5 runs of hats. You can go through a couple dozen hats before you actually got to replace the whole piece of the sticky backing that you used to go onto the bottom of that. See how it does that hole? Patch the hole. You just put another piece of sticky backing underneath the bottom of it. Pulls off, do another one under the bottom of it. It'll get to a point it becomes too thick and it's a headache, but you can keep going and going and going. Puff. Puff is always sewed last in a logo, taping the puff in place. Finished with a heat gun and sharp tweezers. That's the secrets to puff. But digitizing, 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 digitizing. Some people will use large rubber bands to hold puff, okay? Some people use pins to hold puff. I prefer tape. I used to like duct tape because I grew up, I'm a MacGyver generation, so there's nothing a man cannot fix if he has a roll of duct tape, right? Duct tape might as well be Scotch tape nowadays. What tape exists that makes duct tape look like Scotch tape? Gorilla tape. So I use Gorilla tape. Fold over the corner of it, that way it's easy to remove. I use it multiple times before I have to use a new piece. Holds the puff in place so it takes off and sews all the way across. Finishing with the heat gun and the sharp tweezers. On puff, in sharp corners, where columns meet each other, is where you'll normally find the little pieces of foam that don't want to perforate. They don't want to cut, right? The worst thing you can do is try to pick those and remove them. You will destroy the threads, the stitching, and everything else. So if you got a good pair of sharp tweezers, or does anybody do any weeding? You know the weeding tools? You're doing your vinyl and stuff? Those work good too. I got one of those first like in like 94. I think the first week I used that, I mean, I ran out of Band-Aids. I don't know how many holes I put in my fingers the first week I learned how to weed something. Because it's like, oh, I can get this. Oh crap. It was nonstop. All right. So when you have that area that wants to stick out and you know that heat gun is not going to take care of it, it's just too big a chunk of foam. You take those sharp tweezers, close them, or that weeding tool, you stick it on that foam and you push. That foam will tuck right back in the inside of that thread like the head of a turtle going in a shell. And then the little fuzzies you have around the outside, you take a nice commercial heat gun and you heat it up. 6 to 8 inches away. I do it with my hand on the inside of the hat so I can feel how hot the hat is getting, because what will a heat gun do if you're not careful? It will melt and burn everything. Singe it and melt it. Horrible. So I do that with my hand. How many of you tried a hairdryer? Nobody? Good. They don't work. They also have elements in them that makes them shut off because they get too hot. They'll work again. They don't get hot enough, okay? Harbor Freight or Northern Tool sells those commercial heat guns for $9.99. The best holster in the world for a heat gun that I found by mistake, a customer was doing it one day, because I've seen people catch shirts on fire, tables on fire, walls on fire with a heat gun. My advice is when you're done with all your hats, don't do them one at a time. Wait until the order is done and then heat everything at one time. That way you're only turning the heat gun on once. But if you are turning it on and off, on and off, on and off, on and off, all you need is an oversized ceramic coffee cup. One day I was working on a 6-head, the lady was on the other 6-head running hats. She was doing puff and she kept turning the heat gun on and off. I'm in the floor working. She keeps putting the heat gun down and I'm thinking, I got to get up and tell this woman she's going to catch this whole building on fire with me in it. Nope. She had this big jumbo coffee cup. Of course, it didn't have coffee in it. And just turn the heat gun off and stick it in. That's it. If it's bulky, don't stick, use double-sided tape under the bottom of it. You can use heat gun as much as you want. That's what ceramic's made for. Heat. Doesn't hurt a thing.